ladies and gentlemen. I guess we're going to start now as people continue to trickle in a little bit. I just want to be able to get things on as timely as possible. First, I'd like to just tell you good morning and welcome you to the first annual conference held by the International Center for Ethno and Religious Mediation. My name is Francisco Pucciarello, and I will be the moderator for the afternoon part of the program today. Our morning moderator is yet to come, but she's on her way. The way we schedule the conference today is kind of going to be arranged like a book. Our first speakers are going to be highlighting some of the ideological frameworks that identify conflict and their origins. So the ideas in which we view conflict and how we approach them. The next chapter, so to speak, will be to revolve around some of the conflicts themselves. So talking about some of the conflicts in the world today that will be that are affecting us most presently. And our conclusion, kind of the ending part of this this book, will be then reviewing the scholarly work on relevant and effective ways in resolving these conflicts today. So our speakers are going to be talking on these behalfs. And to make myself relevant today, I will tell you that before starting as the fundraising and development coordinator for our organization, I really had my doubts. I had been propositioned many times previously to join a multitude of different organizations that revolve around social issues that I was really passionate about. Hearing about them from leading executives in those organizations, however, I realized that they weren't particularly for me. Either their approach wasn't something I could agree with, they had little specificity in their main purpose, or the fundamental energy driving these organizations just was a negative energy. And then not too long ago, however, a man who I quickly realized is of high integrity and commanded my respect introduced me to our organization that we're part of today. He is the founder and the chief operating officer of the International Center for Ethno-Religious Mediation. His passion for ethnic and religious conflict resolution comes from a past in an environment ripe with violent conflict in his mother country, Nigeria. His experiences with conflict in his own life have given him a deep sense of empathy and dedication, which is exactly what we need here today and brought us here today. It is with honor and excitement that I finally have the chance to introduce you to a great man and an even better friend. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Basil Ugorji.
Good morning, everyone. As Francisco said, my name is Basil Yukoji, and I'm the humble founder and chief operating officer of the International Center for Ethno-Religious Mediation. On behalf of the ICERM board members, our sponsors, our staff, volunteers, and partners, it is my sincere honor and high privilege to welcome you all to the first annual International Conference on Ethnic and Religious Conflict Resolution and Peacebuilding. I want to thank you all for taking the time from your busy schedules or retired life to join us for this occasion. It is so wonderful to see and be in the company of many renowned scholars, conflict resolution practitioners, policymakers, leaders, and students from many countries around the world. We know some are still not yet here, or they're on their way coming. I would like to mention that many people would have loved to be here, but due to one reason or the other, they're not able to come. Some of whom are watching this very event live online as we are speaking right now. So permit me also to welcome our online community to this very conference. Through this international conference, we want to send a message of hope to the world, especially to the young people and children who are getting frustrated over the frequent, incessant, and violent ethnic and religious conflicts that presently confront us in our world. The 21st century continues to experience waves of ethnic and religious violence, making it one of the most devastating threats to peace, political stabilization, economic growth, and security in our world. These conflicts have killed and maimed tens of thousands and displaced hundreds of thousands, planting the seed for even greater violence in the future. For our first annual international conference, we have chosen the theme, The Advantages of Ethnic and Religious Identity in Conflict Mediation and Peace Building. Too often, differences in ethnicity and faith traditions are seen as a drawback to the peace process. It is time to turn these assumptions around and rediscover the benefits that these differences offer. It is our contention that societies made up of an amalgamation of ethnicities and faith traditions offer largely unexplored assets to the policymakers, donor and humanitarian agencies, and mediation practitioners working to assist them. This conference is therefore aimed at introducing a positive look at ethnic and religious groups and their roles in conflict resolution and peace building. Papers for presentation, as we're about to see during the second part of this very conference, we highlight the importance of sharing commonalities among different ethnicities and religious traditions. The goal is to help us and help one another discover and make the most of what these our populations have to offer in terms of mitigating conflict, advancing peace, and strengthening economies for the betterment of all. It is the purpose of this conference, once again, to help us get to know one another and see our connections and commonalities in a way that has never been made available in the past. To inspire new thinking, stimulate ideas, inquiries, and dialogue, and also share empirical accounts which will introduce and support evidence of the numerous advantages that multi-ethnic and multi-faith populations offer to facilitate peace and advance socioeconomic well-being. We have planned an exciting program for all of us, a program that includes a keynote speech, insights from the experts, and panel discussions. We are confident that through these activities, we will acquire new practical ideas and skills that will help us prevent and resolve ethnic and religious conflicts in our world. Our organization, ICERM, places strong emphasis on open-hearted discussions in the spirit of give and take, reciprocity, mutual trust, and goodwill. We believe that contentious issues have to be resolved privately and quietly, and complicated problems cannot be solved by simply holding violent demonstrations, coups, wars, bombings, assassinations, terrorist attacks, and massacres, or by headlines in the press. As Donald Horowitz, one of my mentors, said in his book, Ethnic Groups in Conflict, it is only through mutual discussion and goodwill that amicable settlement can be reached. With all humility, I would like to add that what started in 2012 as a modest project that was aimed at proposing alternative methods of preventing, resolving, and educating people about ethnic and religious conflicts in countries around the world has today become a vibrant nonprofit organization and an international movement, one that embodies the community of spirit and a network of bridge builders from many countries around the world. We are honored to have in our midst some of our bridge builders who flew into New York from many countries, from Africa, Europe, and Asia. Some of them traveled from their home countries to attend this very conference here. They worked tirelessly with me and the other members of our organization to make this event possible. Some of them are still on the way. I wish to take this opportunity to thank our board members, some who are here and those who are not here, especially the chair of the board of directors, Dr. Diana Wonyu. Since 2012, Dr. Diana and I, with the help of our board members, have worked day and night in order to make ICERM a functioning organization. Unfortunately, Dr. Diana Wonyu is physically absent due to some urgent needs that she has to attend to. I want to read a portion of the message I received from her a few hours ago. Hello, my dear friend. You have earned such great faith and admiration from me that I have no doubt that everything that you put your hand to during these coming days will be a substantial success. I will be with you and our other members in spirit while I'm away. And I will look forward to hearing about every moment as the conference comes together and celebrates what can be possible when people are willing to put their care and attention towards the most important of all goals, peace. I am heart-sore at the thought of not being there to provide helping hands and words of encouragement for this event, but have to trust that the highest good is unfolding as it should. That was from Dr. Diana Wonyu. In a special way, I would like to publicly acknowledge the support we have received from an important person in my life. Without this person's patience, generous financial support, encouragement, technical and professional assistance, and dedication to fostering a culture of peace, this organization would not have existed. Please join me to thank my beautiful wife, Diomaris Gonzalez, who is just right there at the door. Diomaris is the strongest pillar that ICERM has. As the conference day was approaching, she took 2 days off from her important job in order to make sure that this conference is successful. I will not also forget to acknowledge the role of my mother-in-law, who is right here, who's been taking care of our baby while I stay and work for ICERM. And finally, we are thrilled to have with us someone who understands the issues that we want to discuss at this very conference better than most of us. She's a faith leader, an author, activist, analyst, professional speaker, and career diplomat. She is the immediate past ambassador at large for international religious freedom for the United States of America. For the past 4.5 years, 2 years of preparing for and passing a unanimous U.S. Senate confirmation hearing, and 2.5 years in office, she had the privilege and honor of serving the first African-American president of the United States, appointed by President Barack Obama as the United States Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. She was the principal advisor to both the President of the United States and Secretary of State for Religious Freedom globally. She was the first African American and the first female to hold this very position. She was the third ambassador at large since its creation and represented the United States in more than 25 countries and more than 100 diplomatic engagements, integrating religious freedom into the U.S. foreign policy and national security priorities. An international influencer and success strategist, known for her bridge-building giftedness and distinctive diplomacy with dignity. She has just been named a distinguished visiting fellow at the Catholic University of America for 2014 and has been invited to be a fellow at Oxford University in London. Essence magazine named this very woman one of the top 40 power women, along with First Lady Michelle Obama in 2011. And Moves magazine recently named her as one of the top Power Moves women for 2013 at a red carpet gala in New York City. She is the recipient of several awards, including the Woman of Conscience Award from the UN, the Martin Luther Jr. Award, the Visionary Leaders Award, the Judith Hollister Peace Award, and the Hellenic Award for Public Service. And has also authored 10 books, 3 of them bestsellers. As for her honors and highlights, of her life, she says, I am a faith entrepreneur connecting business, faith, and political leaders around the globe. Today, she is here to share with us her experiences in connecting ethnic and religious groups in countries around the world and help us understand the advantages of ethnic and religious identity in conflict mediation and peace building. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome the keynote speaker of our first annual international conference on ethnic and religious conflict resolution and peace building, Ambassador Suzan Johnson-Cook.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom.
Good morning.
For me and you.
It is such an honor to be with you this morning. I bring you greetings. I'm a native New Yorker. So for those from out of town, I welcome you to our city, New York, New York. The city's so nice, they have named it twice. And we are really thankful to Basil Ugorji and his family and to all of those who are members of the board and to all of those who are members of the body of ICERM and to each of you who are present today and also those online. I greet you with joy. I am so delighted and ignited and excited to be the first keynote speaker for the first conference as we explore the theme advantages on ethnic and religious identity on conflict mediation and peace building. It certainly is a topic dear to my heart and I hope to yours. As Basil said, for the past 4.5 years, I had the privilege and honor and pleasure of serving President Barack Obama, the first African-American president of the United States. And I want to thank him and Secretary Hillary Clinton for nominating me, appointing me, and for helping me get through 2 Senate confirmation hearings. But it was such a joy to be there as your woman in Washington and to continue as a diplomat speaking all over the world. So it's many things that have happened for me. I had all 199 countries as part of my portfolio. Many ambassadors are what we know as chiefs of mission, and they have a particular country, but I had the whole globe. And so it was quite an experience looking at foreign policy and national security really from a faith-based perspective. I think it was really significant that he had a faith leader in this particular role. And so being a faith leader, sitting at the table, sitting across from cultures that many were faith-led, really provided quite an insight and also shifted the paradigm, I believe, in terms of diplomatic and diplomacy all over the globe. There were 3 of us who were faith leaders in the administration. We all have moved on at the end of last year, but Ambassador Miguel Diaz was the ambassador to the Holy See at the Vatican. Ambassador Michael Battle was the ambassador for the African Union, and I was the ambassador for international religious freedom. So to have 3 clergy scholars at the diplomatic table was quite progressive. As an African American female faith leader who was not only on the front lines of churches and temples and synagogues, but also on 9/11. I was on the front lines as a police chaplain here in New York City. But now, having been to the senior level of government as a diplomat, I've experienced life and leadership from many different perspectives. You know, I've sat with elders, I've sat with the Pope, I've sat with youth, I've sat with NGO leaders, faith leaders, corporate leaders, government leaders, to try to get a handle on the very subject that we're talking about today, that this conference is exploring. Because when people really identify themselves, ourselves, we really can't separate or negate ourselves from who we are. And each of us has deep cultural, ethnic roots. We have faith, we have religious natures of our being. Many states that I presented myself in front of were states that ethnicity and religion was part of its culture. And so it was very important to be able to understand that there were many layers. I just got back from Abuja prior to leaving in Nigeria, Basil's home country. And it was not just one thing that you went in to talk about. You had to look at the complexities of culture and ethnicities and tribes that went back several hundred years. But almost every religion, almost every state has some sort of welcoming, blessing, dedication, christening, service for the new life as it enters the world. And then there's several rituals that happen for that life for the various stages of development, bar mitzvahs and bas mitzvahs and rites of passage and confirmations. So religion and ethnicity are integral to the human experience. And so religious ethno-leaders become important to the part of the discussion because they don't have to always be part of the formal institution. In fact, many religious leaders, actors, and interlocutors can really separate themselves from some of the bureaucracy that many of us had to deal with. I can tell you as a pastor, going into the State Department with the layers of bureaucracy, I had to shift my thinking, I had to shift my paradigm, because the pastor in an African-American church is really the queen bee or the queen king, or the king bee, if you want to say it. And when you go, you have to understand who the principals are. And I was the mouthpiece of the President of the United States and the Secretary of State, and there were many layers in between. So to write a speech, when I would send it out, it would come back after 48 different eyes saw it, and it would be very different than what I originally sent. But that's understanding the bureaucracy that you're under. Religious leaders not in an institution can really be transformational because many times they are free of the chains of authority. So there are pluses and there are minuses. Because sometimes that people who are religious leaders are confined to their own little world, and they live in their bubble, their religious bubble. And so they're in their community, and so when they see people who do not walk like, speak like, act like, think like themselves, sometimes there's conflict inherent just in their myopia. And so it's important to be able to look at the total pictures today, which is what we're looking at, because when religious actors have been exposed and they can be really part of the mix, they can really be part of mediation and peace building. I was privileged to sit at the table when Secretary Clinton created what was called the Strategic Dialogue with Civil Society. And many faith leaders and ethnic leaders, NGO leaders were invited to the table with government. Instead of government saying this is what they believe, it was a chance for them and us to say what we actually believed. So I believe there's several keys to ethno-religious approaches to conflict resolution and peace building. First, as I said earlier, is that religious leaders, ethnic leaders have to be exposed to life in its fullest, not just staying in their own world, in their little confines, but really being open to the broadness of what society has to offer. Here in New York City, we have 106 different languages, 108 different ethnicities. And so you have to really be able to be exposed to the whole world. I don't think it was any accident that I was born in New York, the most diverse city in the world. In my apartment building, where I lived in the Yankee Stadium area, they called it the Morrisania area, on my floor there are 17 apartments, and there were 14 different ethnicities on that particular floor. So we grew up really understanding each other's cultures. We grew up as friends. It was not you are Jewish and you're Caribbean American and you're African. We grew up as friends and neighbors, and we began to come together and be able to see a worldview. My children now, for their graduation presents, are going to the Philippines and to Hong Kong, so they are citizens of the world. And I think that religious ethnic leaders have to make sure that they are citizens of the world and not just their world. Because when you are really myopic and you are not exposed, that is what leads to religious extremism, because you think that everybody thinks like you, and if they don't, then they're out of whack. Well, really, if you're not thinking like the world, you're out of whack. So I think that we have to really look at the total picture. One of the prayers that I took with me on the road as I traveled on a flight almost every other week was from the Old Testament, which was the Jewish scriptures, because Christians are really Judeo-Christians, but it was from the Old Testament. It was called the Prayer of Jabez, and it's found in 1 Chronicles 4:10. And one version said is, Lord, increase my opportunities that I might touch more lives for you, not that I might get the glory, but that you might get more glory. But it was about increasing my opportunities, expanding my horizon. Take me places that I have not been so that I might understand and comprehend those who may not be like me. And I found it to be very helpful at the diplomatic table and in my life. The second thing that needs to happen is that governments must make the effort to bring ethnic and religious leaders to the table. I shared with you the strategic dialogue that was created with civil society, but also there were public-private partnerships brought into the State Department, because one thing I've learned is you've got to have funds to fuel the vision. And unless you have the resources at your hand, then we really don't get anywhere. Today was courageous for Basil to put this together, but it takes funds to be in the area of the United Nations to be able to put these conferences together. So the creation of public-private partnerships. And then we also had faith leader roundtables. And that faith leaders were not limited to just clergy, but it was also those who were members of faith groups who began to help whoever identified themselves as a faith group. So it went from the 3 Abrahamic traditions, but also to Scientologists and Baha'is and other faiths that identified themselves as a faith. So we have to be able to listen and have conversations. And Basil, I really applaud you for the courage of bringing us together this morning. It's courageous and it's so important. Let's give them a hand. And to your team, I hope I helped to put this together. So I believe all religious and ethnic leaders can make sure that they're exposed and that governments can't just see their own perspective, nor can faith communities just see one perspective, but all of those leaders must come together, because many times religious and ethnic leaders are really suspect of governments because they believe that they have the company, the party line, and so it must be important for everybody to sit at the table together. The third thing that needs to happen is religious and ethnic leaders must make a special concerted effort to interact with other ethnicities and other religions that are not their own. Right before 9/11, I was a pastor in Lower Manhattan, where I'll be going after this conference today. I pastored the oldest Baptist church in New York City. It was called Mariners Temple, first female in 200-year history of the American Baptist churches. And so what it did, it is instantly made me kind of part of what they call the big steeple churches. My church was huge. We grew quickly. And so it allowed me to interact with pastors like at Trinity Church on Wall Street and Marble Collegiate Church. And the late pastor of Marble Collegiate, his name was Arthur Caliandro. And at the time, a lot of children were disappearing or getting killed in New York. And he called what he called the big steeple pastors together. And so it became imams and rabbis of Temple Emmanuel and imams of mosques throughout New York City. And we came together and formed what was called the Partnership of Faith of New York City. And so when 9/11 happened, we were already partners. And so we didn't have to try to understand different religions. We already were one. And it wasn't just a matter of sitting around a table and having breakfast together, which is what we did monthly, but it was about being intentional about understanding each other's cultures so that we had social events together. We would exchange pulpits. So a mosque might be in a temple and a mosque might be in a church and vice versa. We shared seders at Passover time, so it'd be a Christian and a Jew, and all of the events so that we understood each other socially. So we wouldn't plan a banquet when it was Ramadan. You know, we understood and respected and learned from each other that when it was fasting time for a particular religion, or when it was holy high days for the Jews, or when it was Christmas or the seasons that were Easter that were important to us. And we began to really intersect. And so the Partnership of Faith of New York City continues to thrive and be alive. And so as new pastors and new imams and new rabbis come into the city, they already have a welcoming, interactive, interfaith group. And so it's very important that we not only stay outside of our own world, but that we interact with others so that we might learn. But let me tell you where my real heart is, that it's not just religious ethno, but it also has to be religious ethno-gender inclusivity. And women have been absent from the decision-making and diplomatic tables, but they're present in conflict resolution. And so what was probably the most powerful experience for me was traveling to Liberia, West Africa, and sitting with the women. Two of them became Nobel Peace Prize winners, but sitting with the women who had actually brought peace to Liberia at a time when there was extreme war between the Muslims and the Christians, and men were killing each other. And the women, dressed in white, said, "We're not coming home, we're not doing anything until there's peace." And so they band together as Muslim and Christian women. In fact, they formed a human chain all the way up to Parliament, and they sat in the middle of the street and they did activities. So when a Muslim was killed, Christians went, and vice versa. And the women who met in the marketplace say, "We shop together, so we've got to bring peace together." And it was revolutionary to Liberia, where peace was actually brought. So women have to be part of the discussion for conflict resolution and peace building. Women who are engaged in peace building and conflict resolution draw support from religious and ethno organizations worldwide. And women tend to deal with relationship building and are able to reach across lines of tension very easily. And so it's very important that we have women at the table, because in spite of their absence from the decision-making table, women of faith are already on the front lines of peace building, not just in Liberia, but throughout the world. So we've got to move past words and into action to find a way for women to be included, to be listened to be empowered, to work for peace in our communities. And even though they're disproportionately affected by conflict, women have been the emotional and spiritual backbone of communities in time of attack, have mobilized our communities for peace and mediated disputes and found ways to help the community step away from violence. When you look at it, you know, women represent 50% of the population. So if you exclude women from these discussions, we're negating half of the needs of an entire population. But I'd like to also commend another model to you. It's called the Sustained Dialogue Approach. And I was fortunate just a few weeks ago to sit with the founder of that, is a man named Harold Saunders. They're based in Washington, D.C., but on 45 college campuses, this model has been used for ethno-religious conflict resolution and bringing leaders together to bring peace, from high school to college to adults. And some of the things that need to happen with this particular methodology is, one, persuading enemies to talk to one another. And then two, what do they do if there's an identity clash? So it gives them an opportunity to vent, if it means yelling and screaming, because number three, gradually they get tired of yelling and screaming, and they have to name the problem. What are you yelling and screaming about? You know, what are you so angry about? And people have to really be able to name that. Sometimes it's historical tension, and it's just been going on for years and years. And so you're like, at some point, we've got to let this in. Like they used to talk about the McCoys on TV. At some point, this has to end. So they have to name the problem. And then the people have to open up and begin to share not only what they're angry about, but what the possibilities might be if we get past this anger. And then they have to come to some consensus. So the sustained dialogue approach, Harold Saunders, is something I commend to you as well. But I've also established what's called the pro-voice movement for women. In my world where I was ambassador, it was a very conservative movement, and you always had to identify whether you're pro-life or a pro-choice. And my thing is that was still very limiting. Those were two limiting options, and they came from men usually. And so pro-voice is a movement that's bringing, in New York, primarily Black and Latino women together for the first time to the same table. We've cohabitated, we've grown up together, but we've never been at the table together. And pro-voice means that every voice matters. Every woman has a voice in every arena of her life, not just our reproductive system, but we have a voice in everything that we do. And so we are just starting, in your packets, the first meeting is next Wednesday here in New York, October 8th at the Harlem State Office Building. So those who are here, please feel welcome to join us. The Honorable Gail Brewer, who's the Manhattan Borough President, will be in dialogue with us. But we're talking about women winning. Not being in the back of the bus or the back of the room, but women winning. And so both pro-voice and sustained dialogue look at the problems behind the problems. They're not necessarily just methodologies, but they're bodies of thought and practice. How do we move forward together? And so we hope to amplify, unify, multiply the voices of women through the pro-voice movement. And it's online as well. We have a beginning of our website, provoicemovement.com. But they're relationship-based, because we're building relationships. Relationships are essential to dialogue and mediation and ultimately peace. When peace wins, everyone wins. And so what we're looking at is how do we collaborate, how do we communicate, how do we find consensus, how do we coalition build? So that one of the things I learned in government is that no one person, no one entity can do it alone any longer. Number one, you don't have the energy. Number two, you don't have the funds. But number three, there's so much more strength when you do it together, because you can go an extra mile or two. And they also require not just relationship building, but they require listening. And I believe if there's any skill that women have is that we are great listeners. So these are worldview movements for the 21st century. In New York, we're going to concentrate on Blacks and Latinas coming together. In Washington, we're going to look at liberals and conservatives coming together, but women being strategized for change, listening enough to one another that change is inevitable and important for us. So relationship-based, communication-based, listening to one another. I'd like to also commend some reading and some programs to you. The first book that I commend to you is called 3 Testaments by Brian Anthony Brown. It's a big, thick book. It looks like what we used to call an encyclopedia, but it has the Quran, it has the New Testament, it has the Old Testament, and it's 3 testaments together, examining the 3 major Abrahamic religions and looking at places that we can find some similarity and commonality. In your packet is a card for my new book called Becoming a Woman of Destiny. The paperback comes out tomorrow. You can blow us away. It can become a bestseller if you go online and get it. But it's based on the biblical Deborah from the Judeo-Christian scriptures and judges, who was a woman of destiny. She was multifaceted. She was a judge. She was a prophetess. She was a wife. And it looks at how she managed her life to also bring peace to her community. The third reference that I would like to give you is called Religion, Conflict, and Peacebuilding, and it's available through USAID. And it talks about what this particular day examines today. I would certainly commend this to you. And for those interested in women and religious peace building, it's called Peaceworks, and the title is Women in Religious Building. And it's done by the Berkeley Center in conjunction with the United States Institute for Peace. And the last one, I've got to squat down because it fell. Excuse me. Oh, thank you. Is the program that I met. It's a young man. This is a high school program called Operation Understanding. It brings together Jewish and African-American high schoolers who not only sit around a table together, they travel together. So they went into the Deep South. They will go into the Midwest, they come into the North, and they will begin to go overseas to understand each other's cultures, so that, the Jewish bread may be one thing and the black bread may be cornbread, but how do we find the places that we can sit and learn together? And these high schoolers are revolutionizing what we're trying to do in terms of peace building and really conflict resolution. They spent some time in Israel, and they will continue to spend some time in this nation. So I commend these programs to you. A wonderful, wonderful young man is executive director, and I was just very impressed. So I'm convinced that we have to listen to what people on the ground are saying, people living in situations are saying. In my travels abroad, I actively sought to hear what people, particularly at the grassroots level, were saying. It's one thing to have religious and ethnic leaders, but those who are on the grassroots level can begin to share positive initiatives that they are taking that sometimes work through a structure, but many times they work because they're organized on their own. So I've learned that we can't come in with preconceived notions that are set in stone about what a group needs to achieve peace or conflict resolution, but it's a collaborative process that takes place over time. We can't be in a hurry because the situation didn't get into that situation in a short period of time. And as I said, sometimes it's layers and layers, complexities that have happened over years and sometimes hundreds of years. So when we are ready to pull back the layers, like the layer of an onion, what we have to do is understand that long-term change does not happen immediately, and that governments alone cannot do it. But those of us in this room, religious and ethnic leaders who are committed to the process, can do it. So I believe that we all win when peace wins. I believe that we want to continue to do good work because good work receives good results in a matter of time. And wouldn't it be great if the press would cover events like this in terms of us really trying to give peace a chance? There's a song that says, "Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me." Well, I hope today that we've begun that process, and by your presence and by your leadership and bringing us all together, I believe that we have really put a notch on that belt in terms of getting closer to peace. It is my pleasure to have been with you, to share with you. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but thank you so much for this opportunity, for your first conference to be your first keynoter. Thank you very much.
Great keynote speech by Suzan Johnson-Cook. Again, thank you so much. We would now like to present her with an honorary award for her accomplishments in fighting for international freedom, international religious freedom. So thank you one more time.
Okay, I'll sit. These heels are kind of cute, but they're not practical. All right. Thank you so much. My pleasure. This is okay. Thank you so much.